Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. When he said it, the hall begun to buzz with discussions. It was almost impossible for something like the single cloud covering the entire Eternal Peace Empire to happen, yet it did. Eternal Peace Empire had a broad territory spanning 90,000 miles from east to west and 80,000 miles from north to south. Now that the entire territory was under snow and even for 6-7 continuous days, it was something that should have been impossible. Divine arts practitioners had the ability to summon wind and rain, but they could only make the rain descend and the wind blow in a small area. They could never control the kind of spell that could cover the entire Eternal Peace Empire. However, this was no natural disaster. It rarely snowed in the south of Gold River, while it was even more impossible to have rainy or cold weather at the south of Surging River. On top of that, when it came to Lee River, all 4 seasons were like summer, so there was no possibility of snow there. If that wasn't enough, the snow had descended on the whole empire at the same time. Emperor Yangfeng gave a cough and quieted all the ministers. Minister of Agriculture, there are probably quite a number of ministers who don't understand how scary this snow is. You can explain it to them. An old minister stepped out of the ranks. He was the Minister of Agriculture of Eternal Peace Imperial Court and managed the agriculture of the entire empire. He bowed and said, "Your Majesty, ministers, this snow disaster doesn't affect the next year's harvest for the villages to the north since they are used to enduring through winter and had made preparations. The crucial point is the south. After this huge snow, the villages of the south will probably be frozen clean. When the next year comes, the south would most likely have no harvest at all." The Minister of Revenue immediately asked, "Minister of Agriculture, by the south you mean everything south of Gold River?" All of the ministers took in a cold breath, and even Qin Mu was shocked. He also had a geographic map of Eternal Peace Empire. Gold River originated in the Great Ruins and stretched all the way to the east for tens of thousands of miles before entering the ocean. The land south of Gold River was 2/3 of Eternal Peace Empire's land. This meant that 2/3 of the Empire's land would have no harvest. Your Majesty, I think we should channel the rations and fodder from all places to the south, preparing to send relief. Grand Servant stepped out of the ranks and bowed. The south just went through a war, so there are many counties that still require relief. I'm afraid that the rations there have already been depleted, so may Your Majesty channel rations from the north to save those people from the disaster. Minister of Agriculture sighed. As of now, we can't channel anything. Lords might not know, but the war had depleted rations and most of them are gone everywhere. If we channel the rations to the south now, they will only be eaten by the starving people. Once these rations are finished, we won't even have the grains to plant anymore, and there will be nothing to eat when autumn comes. Lord Grand Servant, if the starving people have nothing to eat, they will start eating humans. Are we supposed to just let the people of the south starve? Minister of Agriculture said, provisions would have to be transported to the south, but we must provide them in limited quantity. We need to give them just enough to survive. There are actually some granaries in the south, but they all belong to influential families and landlords. If we want to touch their provisions, I'm afraid they would instigate the disaster victims to rebel. Your Majesty. Emperor Yanfeng's expression sunk, and he said, I will think of something regarding the provisions of the influential families and landlords. Continue. Yes. Other than the south, there's another huge disaster looming over us, said Minister of Agriculture. The north is usually cold during winter, but it's even colder this year. Walking through a few counties in the north, I discovered farmers chopping down trees to burn them for warmth. This resulted in many forests being cleared out, turning the area bare. For the north, which can endure the cold to resort to chopping trees for warmth, you can imagine the current situation in the south. If the trees in the south are completely cleared out, mountain torrents, landslides, and floods will definitely become endless. A natural disaster can result in a man-made disaster, and a man-made disaster can result in many more natural disasters. However, if we don't let the victims chop down trees for warmth, I'm afraid that countless people will be frozen to death. When that time comes, I'm afraid most of the families will die. Emperor Yangfeng let out a deep breath, and the ministers of the imperial court also became quiet. It was so silent that even the noise of breathing became jarring. If they didn't chop down the trees to burn, the farmers would be frozen to death. Yet if they chopped down the trees, there would be more disasters. A snow disaster had made a huge empire like Eternal Peace Empire sink into circumstances in which they had to make a difficult choice. Minister of Agriculture continued, the crucial point is that we don't know how long this cloud will last. If the gloomy cloud disperses in a few days, we can minimize the damage to the lowest. But if it doesn't, the empire will be in danger. I understand. Emperor Yangfeng leaned back, looking powerless. Now, my dear ministers, do you understand how dangerous the situation is, right? Lately, some renegades rebelled, but I was still unworried and didn't pay any attention to it. I knew nothing would come out from what they were doing, and they would be eradicated by Imperial Preceptor and my dear ministers. However, this snow disaster and this cloud is going to break our Eternal Peace's fate. Dear ministers, do you have a way to solve this? All of the civil and military ministers fell silent. Even with their remarkable abilities, they couldn't blow away the cloud or melt the snow. Emperor Yangfeng looked at his ministers and felt angry and anxious in his heart. Snow, a single cloud, were they going to tear this empire apart, destroy their 100 years of effort? A civil official said, I think this is because Imperial Preceptor's reform has angered the heaven. Emperor Yangfeng burst into anger. Drag him out and execute him. That civil official immediately knelt down and cried out with all his might, Your Majesty, heaven has its heavenly law, and Imperial Preceptor's reform is going to change the heavenly law, so heaven is angered. People will suffer from the anger of heaven, unable to do anything about it, Your Majesty. Men. Emperor Yangfeng was infuriated. A disaster is upon our empire and you're still eager to delude people with lies. If he's not executed now, will I have to do it myself? The guards inside the emperor's audience hall dragged that civil official away. The cries of the man gradually moved farther away. Emperor Yangfeng paced around anxiously, suppressing his anger. I want ministers that are able to work and are not useless puppets that only know how to slander. This reform is what I want and not what Imperial Preceptor wants. If heaven is angered, then it should be angry at me and make me suffer. Imperial Preceptor is a capable minister. Not to say 500 years, it is even rare to find someone like him within 1 to 2,000 years. You all shall think of a solution for me. If you can't think of anything, there's no need for any of you to go home and no need for you to celebrate New Year's. Your Majesty, why not store the cloud away? A voice asked from the audience hall. Since you can't chase it away, why not just store it away? All of the ministers looked over at the speaker, and Emperor Yangfeng's gaze also moved on him. So it's Palace Grandee. What great idea does Palace Grandee have? Why not share it with all of us? Qin Mu said, I have seen treasures like the fire bottle gourds in the army which the soldiers used to store their true fire. When it comes time to battle, they would release the fire stored inside. When Hall of Supreme Healing slipped up in refining medicine and paralyzed the entire Imperial College, the former Grand Chancellor had used a bottle gourd to store away the anesthesia to save Imperial College. I was thinking if we could use treasures like the bottle gourd to also store away this dark cloud. Emperor Yangfeng looked at General of Heavenly Strategies and asked, General Qin, do you think this can work? General of Heavenly Strategies had the surname Qin and name Jian. He was the head of the generals and also the sect master of the influential Qin family in the capital city. He stepped out of his ranks and said, Your Majesty, what Palace Grandee suggested is plausible. However, there aren't this many fire bottle gourds in the army. The ones we use are wisteria bottle gourds which are handed to the vermilion bird troops all around the world. There is a total of 1 million such bottles in the entire empire, and this amount would only be enough to store away one province worth of dark cloud. With so many provinces in the empire, it isn't possible to rely solely on the fire bottle gourds from the army. Qin Mu then spoke up. Even though there aren't many bottle gourds in the army, the empire has many officials that cultivate spells and influential families with powerful people. There are numerous strong practitioners in the Imperial Court as well, and with a decree from your Majesty you could order all them to create treasures to store away the dark cloud in the sky. With so many people, the county magistrates, young magistrates, and magistrates who are also strong practitioners could take responsibility for the area under their jurisdiction. With the strong practitioners of the army going to help out in each and every area, we could expect to mostly get rid of the dark cloud. Emperor Yangfeng pondered it for a moment. There would be some difficulty in mobilizing the divine arts practitioners of the entire empire to get rid of the cloud. There are some wandering divine arts practitioners in the martial world who don't listen to the orders of the Imperial Court. Therefore we will need your Majesty to do it yourself, showing an example to the whole world, said Qin Mu. If your Majesty leaves the capital and goes to each province to store away the dark cloud, the people will naturally follow suit. Most of the civil and military officials looked at one another. If the emperor left the capital to store away the dark cloud, the remnants of the sects would probably take advantage of this to assassinate him, since their rebellion had just been quelled. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor went to great ruins for battle and got ambushed, which resulted in him returning in failure. If the emperor was to leave the capital, he would definitely have to suffer all kinds of assassination attempts. Just as everyone was about to say something, Emperor Yanfeng's eyes lighted up and he smiled. Right. Minister Qin, do you have any other ideas to handle this snow disaster? The snow disaster is already here, and I'm helpless to do anything. Qin Mu said, I've heard of a sentence once, the path of a saint is not different than the one of a common person. With so many divine arts practitioners in the world, if the sun came out and melted the snow, you could have these divine arts practitioners personally go down to help clear up the frozen villages. They could help plant the grains again, and there might even be harvest next year. If there's no wind, we can invite the divine arts practitioners to send wind. If weeds grow, invite divine arts practitioners to remove the weeds. If there is insect damage, invite divine arts practitioners to remove the insects. If there is frost damage, invite divine arts practitioners to use fire to get rid of the frost. Your Majesty, these are words of the devil. A civil official stepped out from the ranks while trembling with anger. Your Majesty, what Palace Grandee said are words of the devil. This would damage the country and hurt the people. He should be executed on the spot. Emperor Yangfeng smiled. His sentences were very correct, so why are they words of the devil? Those aren't words that would damage the country and hurt the people, but instead, they are good words that would heal the country and save the people. Your position is revoked, go home and reflect on yourself. Minister Qin, what other good strategies do you have? Qin Mu pondered and said, Your Majesty can also make Minister of Sky Supervision watch the weather of all area. During flood years, we can store the rainwater into spirit treasures like the bottled goods. During years of hurricane, we can store the winds inside spirit treasures. We can store tornadoes, hails, lightning, all of them for our own usage. If we meet with years of drought, we can release the rain, and if we fight with other countries, we can release the hails, snow, lightning, and tornadoes. This way, we could deal with our own weather and attack the enemy countries. The snow disaster just now came close to destroying such a glorious empire like Eternal Peace. So if this kind of meteorological divine art was used on an enemy country, which one would be able to withstand it? Your Majesty, controlling the meteorology is defying the heavenly laws. These are words of the devil. Another civil official stepped out of the ranks and kowtowed repeatedly until his head bled. These are words of a true devil and will really destroy our empire. Your Majesty, please quickly kill this demon of the devil path. You're removed from your position. Emperor Yangfeng waved his hand and smiled. If you don't have any ideas, don't spout rubbish and slander Palace Grandee. What's the point of me giving you a high salary every month? This snow cloud is the one destroying our empire. Men, drag him out. Palace Grandee, talk is easy, action is hard. You shall follow me for the disaster relief. Qin Mu hesitated and said with embarrassment, I still have to go home for New Year's. I can recommend some people who could help your Majesty. Emperor Yangfeng laughed out loud and felt that the dark cloud which had shrouded his heart had dispersed. He waved his hand. Approved. That's fine, I'm in need of people now, and if the people you recommend are really useful, I won't leave you wanting. Duke Wei's heart trembled slightly. Heavenly Devil Cult is going to enter the Imperial Court. Come to say of it, I'm now the Heavenly King of Heavenly Devil Cult and have long entered the Imperial Court. This young cult master really knows how to curry favor. With Imperial Preceptor not in the Imperial Court these days, he took the chance to plant his men. If Imperial Preceptor were to stay away for a few years, I'm afraid even the Emperor would become part of Heavenly Devil Cult. Where exactly did Imperial Preceptor go? He went on such a long tour with his wife and doesn't even bother to come back when such a huge thing has happened. This cloud is big enough yet not big enough. This cloud and snow in Eternal Peace Empire are more like a warning. In the west, on majestic Mount Meu, the golden-topped Great Thunderclap Monastery stood tall. It was situated atop the layer of clouds, and old Rulai looked towards the territory of Eternal Peace Empire. He could see the sun shining with a golden brilliance which made the sea-sized cloud abnormally bright. Once, in the long history of Great Thunderclap Monastery, we have witnessed such a meteorological attack. Below old Rulai's seat, the numerous bodhisattvas, venerables, arhats stood in great numbers and listened to his words. That meteorological attack was even larger than this one. It came with heavy snow and a similar dark cloud. The people had no way to make a living, which resulted in natural disasters year after year, and only God knows how many people died. Venerable Ku, go and fetch the Emptiness-era Morning Emperor scriptures from the depository of Buddhist texts and flip it to the 1367th page. A monk with a worried frown stood up and went away. After a moment, this Venerable Ku carried over a thick scripture and flipped to the page which old Rulai had mentioned. Emptiness era, Morning Emperor year 6420, changes in the meteorological phenomenon, snow fell for 30 days, cloud covered 80,000 miles, no sun could be seen. Starving people were everywhere, bandits rose in all places, and Morning Emperor ordered the gods and dragon kings to get rid of them. Morning Emperor year 6430, meteors descended from the sky, meteor shower was like a flood, volcanoes erupted in tens of thousands, the earth trembled, and 1,000 of fissures opened up, drying up the rivers. The ocean was emptied. The next year, the sun disappeared, there was no light from the two heavenly bodies. Behind old Rulai, the hearts of Teacher Po and the rest trembled heavily as they cried out, Rulai, this is great ruins. Old Rulai turned his head back and looked towards the vast uncivilized territory behind Mount Meu. This ancient scroll records the last moments of the divine kingdom of great ruins. The heavy snow and the dark cloud were merely the first warnings. However, the warning now is much earlier than I expected. Earlier, and lighter. It seems like Eternal Peace Empire's doings have caught the eyes of the ones above. Teacher Po, True Lord Tien, and the rest were blown back, and they muttered, great ruins. If the Emperor wants to quell this disaster, the only way is to stop the reform immediately and surrender himself, begging forgiveness from heaven and his people. Old Rulai looked away with a deep gaze. Otherwise, this snow disaster will only be the start, there would be even more terrifying meteorological phenomenon following after. And they will no longer be just snow and a dark cloud. They'll consist of meteor showers, volcano eruptions, dried up rivers and oceans, the vanishing of the sun and the moon. This is the wrath of heaven, the anger of heaven that the people have to bear. This is too much. Rulai, Eternal Peace Crown Prince has sent a person to seek an audience with you. Old Rulai was slightly stunned, then he smiled. This Highness has still come to find me. Invite him forward. At your command. Old Rulai smiled at the monks surrounding him and said, His Highness is quite extraordinary, and he might even be the savior of the world. The Emperor might be obstinately clinging to his course, but the Crown Prince is not the same. His envoy should be worth meeting. Dao sect's Kunlun Jade Void Mountain was called Jade Void Paradise and was like a world unto itself. The 4 seasons on the mountain were like spring and seemed like a sacred ground for immortals. It was no inferior to Mount Meu. The cloud covering eternal peace is a serious yet not overly dangerous warning. It is much more trivial compared to the destruction of great ruins, old Dao Master said to the Taoists of Dao sect with a speed that was neither too fast nor too slow. Our Tao sect was against Eternal Peace Empire's reform, not for our own personal gain, but for the Tao. That reform ruined too many rules and too many principles, so it was destined to fail. It's a pity Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's knowledge was too shallow, and he didn't understand the great terror that would descend. His gaze was deep, but he had an air of calmness as he said slowly, "Back then, when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was still young, he had come to Tao sect to meet me. I could see that he was out of the ordinary and had high expectations for him, so I had allowed him to browse through the legacy scriptures of our Tao sect, hoping he would have success in the future. As for sectarian bias, that was thrown to the back of my head. For such a talent, I naturally had to discard sectarian bias and groom him to the best of my ability. When he had become the Imperial Preceptor, my expectations turned into disappointment. Why? It's because Tao models itself after nature. Most of the experts of Tao sect sat and listened quietly. Tao models itself after nature, so we Taoists can summon the wind and the rain, but we can't change the wind and the rain, nor can we change the nature and the great Tao. I actually had no prejudice against Heavenly Devil cult. On the contrary, I still admire some of its doings. However, our paths are different. Why so? Tao Master shook his head. Tao originates from nature, yet Heavenly Devil cult wants to use the Tao to change the nature. This is the biggest difference between our Tao sect and Heavenly Devil cult. This is also the reason why Heavenly Devil cult is being referred to as the devil. Most of the Taoists of Tao sect were slightly shaken. Den Yangzi said, "I've observed the disciples of Heavenly Devil cult using spells to move the clouds and spread the rain. During periods of drought, they would make rain fall and collect money from the farmers. There were some people using drilling spells to create wells, solving the problem of having no drinking water. There were also people who would use true fire to smelt ores and retrieve the metal to forge farming equipment for sale. There were even some devil cult's disciples that collected money from farmers to hunt down demon beasts. Heavenly Devil cult is indeed going against the nature which Tao originates from, changing the nature." Tao Master said, "Using the path, skills, and divine arts for the common people is to change the nature, to destroy it. Changing the nature and destroying the nature is changing the great Tao and destroying the great Tao. Heavenly Devil cult's teachings are wrong, so they can only move into the devil path. Another of their teachings is to act straightforwardly, to follow the course of nature. This means to let one's desire run wild and do as you please. If this isn't what a devil does, then what is a devil?" He sighed and said, "Imperial Preceptor is too deeply influenced by Heavenly Devil cult, which is why he has used Heavenly Devil cult's ideology to run a country. The disasters that great ruins experienced will also come to Eternal Peace Empire. This is the punishment of heaven, the calamity sent by heaven. Be that as it may, the people are innocent." Tao Master softened his tone then. "You all shall go down the mountain. The punishment from heaven that the Emperor and Imperial Preceptor have invoked shall not be borne by the people. Go and help the commoners that are in trouble and save as many people as you can. When you save the people during your travel, you can also find youths with good foundation and continue adding more descendants to our Tao sect. At your command." The experts of Tao sect all went down the mountain. Tao Master looked up at the cloud above Eternal Peace Empire and sighed. This shouldn't be borne by the people. If Imperial Preceptor and the Emperor still obstinately persist in going about things the wrong way, my Tao sect will have no choice but to enter the secular world. Qin Mu contacted left and right guardians and passed down his decree: "You shall assist the Emperor in sending disaster relief and storing away the dark cloud in the sky. You can send our disciples to the south to help get rid of the frozen crops and replant them. Many people will die in this snow disaster, so just do your best and save as many people as possible. Also, make sure that our disciples remain careful, since there will definitely be riots with such a disaster around. The world will certainly not remain at peace. At your command." Left Guardian Ning Daokai hesitated for a moment, then said, "Sacred Cult Master, what identity shall we assume to assist the Emperor? If the Emperor confers a title on us, shall we accept it?" Qin Mu thought for a moment. "Assist the Emperor with your own identities and with the power of the sacred cult. If the Emperor confers a title on you, just accept it. If the Emperor can tolerate Imperial Preceptor, he can tolerate us too. We are part of Eternal Peace Empire, so there's no need for paranoia. He paused for a moment, then added, even if the world is in chaos, the divine art practitioners who are used to being high at the top will definitely not be willing to become like our heavenly devil cult and serve the ordinary people, helping them in their need. Imperial Preceptor had once said that he killed a batch of contrarians, but he still couldn't kill all of them. After killing one batch, there would be another batch. I had thought Imperial Preceptor was joking, but it seems like it's true. Qin Mu raised his head and looked at the dark cloud in the sky and said with a smile that wasn't really a smile, this snow and the dark cloud have created a disaster that can destroy the country, yet they are still thinking about what is devil-like and what is not. Not once did they think about helping the people. They are probably too used to being high at the top and think that helping the commoners is an insult to them, so it's the devil path. He shook his head. These kind of people aren't few in number, and there are probably extremists among them who would take this chance to rebel or even target our heavenly saint cult. You too must be careful. Cult master, don't worry. Our cult does not have an undeserved reputation for standing tall until now, not crumbling under the so-called orthodox path. The two guardians bowed and left. Qin Mu composed himself and raised his head to look at that dark cloud above Eternal Peace Empire before shaking his head and returning back to Imperial College. Hu Linga, Dragon Chalene, and Dutian Devil King were already waiting on the ship. Qin Mu said, we should buy some New Year's goods on the way back to the village. I'm afraid there might no longer be anything in Border Dragon City. With Eternal Peace Empire in such a precarious situation, I reckon there will be much fewer merchants over there. Dutian Devil King raised his head and sized up the sky while chuckling. Your world is going to be in trouble. This heavy snow and dark cloud has shrouded the entire territory of your Eternal Peace Empire, right? Qin Mu's heart moved slightly, and he asked politely, Lord Devil King, what wise opinion do you have? Kneel down and lick my toes, then I will tell you. Dutian Devil King said, acting high and mighty. Qin Mu threw a glance at Hu Linga, and she opened the compartment in the chest area of the eight-armed god statue. She sat down inside and controlled Dutian Devil King to kneel down and stretch his tongue out to lick Qin Mu's shoes. Dutian Devil King immediately cried out, Devil can be killed but cannot be humiliated. Stop, stop. I'll say it, I'll say it. Qin Mu raised his hand. Hu Linga relaxed her control, and Dutian Devil King immediately jumped up. He spat twice and no longer dared to be impudent. These few days, Hu Linga had been oddly clever and messed with Dutian Devil King until he became submissive. He felt that a wise devil knew better than to fight when the odds were against him, so he could only cooperate with the demon fox. Dutian Devil King raised his hand to wipe his mouth and sneered, this is the method of a god, and not any normal god. If my true body descended, I could also execute this kind of action and use a meteorological phenomenon to attack, eliminating the entire human race. I could wipe out your race and turn this world into the new Dutian. However, the god that used this meteorological attack seems to be a little gentler, so they didn't land a ruthless blow. I reckon this snow and cloud are merely a gentle warning. Warning? Qin Mu was stunned. Just a gentle warning? This gentle warning would probably kill millions of commoners since they wouldn't be able to make it through winter. He got lost in thought, and his mind ventured to Great Ruins. Because of the decree of a god and a devil, the people of Great Ruins were abandoned and gained the despise of everyone else. If the gods and devils don't die, there will be no end to trouble. Qin Mu said coldly. Wife, if the gods and devils don't die, there will be no end to trouble. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stood on the clouds high up in the sky while looking at that incomparably vast cloud above Eternal Peace Empire and sighed ruefully. The woman beside him could only be said to be of average beauty. She wasn't incredibly pretty, but she was not ugly either. She had a pleasant look and was one of the palace maids rewarded to Imperial Preceptor. Among the many of them, she was the only one that became his wife. The thoughts of this woman were very incisive as she asked, Husband didn't go back this time, is it because you feel that the Emperor can solve this natural disaster? Even if the Emperor can't solve it, there will be people who will solve it for him, there's no need for me to return. Eternal peace. Imperial Preceptor smiled. Let us go to the little jade capital in the sky. Little jade capital in the sky? Imperial Preceptor's wife looked up at the sky. It was a very beautiful name. Jade Capital, a capital city made out of jade, the city where immortals lived. It had no smell of smoke or fire as well as no atmosphere of the mortal world. Once, Wanderer Zhen walked out of this mysterious little jade capital to stop me, but it was a pity he failed. Eternal peace. Imperial Preceptor's gaze still held some unanswered questions. Before he died, he told me that I must go to Little Jade Capital and that there would be things there that might change my thoughts. And now, I'm here. In front of them, a beautiful paradise that seemed to have come from a fairy tale appeared faintly in the mist. Qin Mu's treasure ship stopped at Fen Prefecture. He brought Hu Linga out and bought some New Year's goods, filling up the entire ship. Fen Prefecture was still considered peaceful. The magistrate there was gathering divine arts practitioners to create all kinds of spirit weapons before boarding a flying ship to store away the cloud in the sky. There was already sunlight shining in some areas, and the snow was starting to melt. However, everything looked even colder. Fen Prefecture produced a lot of strong alcohol, so the people would normally drink it to fight against the cold. Even though it was very chilly, there were many villagers who would go up the mountain to chop down trees to keep themselves warm with the firewood. In addition, there was an inflation in prices and the goods were much more expensive than they were in the past. Qin Mu was wealthy, so he didn't feel any difference, but Hu Linga did a few calculations and told him, "Young master, the prices have multiplied." Qin Mu was slightly stunned and said, "This is sooner than I thought. Stabilizing the prices of goods is the job of Minister of Revenue, it's not our problem. As long as the dark cloud disperses and the Imperial Court sends disaster relief, there shouldn't be much trouble in the north. I'm just afraid that there will be people creating trouble on purpose." They didn't buy enough New Year's goods in Fen Prefecture, so the treasure ship stopped again at Lai Prefecture. The goods here had also inflated by several times, and there were quite a lot of merchants who started hoarding quite some stocks, waiting for the prices to inflate even more before selling them and making a huge profit. The magistrate of Lai Prefecture had already started to deal with these merchants, using severe punishments in these troubled times. Most of the merchants who had purposely hoarded their stocks were dragged away to be executed. After 2-3 days, Qin Mu's treasure ship reached Jing Prefecture, which wasn't far from great ruins. It was around 10,000 miles away and behind quite a lot of the dark cloud, which was like a piece of white paper which had many holes cut out from it. Sunshine shone down through these holes. This place was much farther, so it had more ground and fewer people. This was why chaos was starting to ensue as mountain bandits started to appear to rob big families. Many poor people could be seen frozen to death on the road as they lay next to an extinguished fire pit. There were also some escapees pulling their families along in this world of ice and snow. They huddled tightly to one another as they stepped on the frozen river and headed to the south in hopes of finding warmth. People didn't say anything when someone would fall back from time to time. These people would squat down to gather the tiniest bit of warmth, but once they squatted down, they would never get up again. The places where the river water accumulated had turned into a large ice mountain which gave off creaking sounds from time to time. Huge chunks of ice would then slide off the body, which looked very terrifying. Qin Mu saw that there were young people who were proficient in spells among the escapees that were taking care of the migrators. He stopped his ship on the frozen surface and made some inquiries. These young people were the disciples of Heavenly Devil Cult. "Tell them to stop looking for a warmer climate, everywhere is frozen," Qin Mu said. "They won't listen." One of the disciples of Heavenly Devil Cult took off the face mask that was defending his face from the cold and revealed his dark red face. He then told their young cult master under the loud whistling of the cold wind, "Once these people stop, they will have no more hope. If they continue walking, there will still be hope in their hearts that they can find a warm place." Qin Mu was stunned. He took out some New Year's goods that could keep people warm and handed them over to the disciples of Heavenly Devil Cult. This was to have them hand it out to the people in trouble. With the whole empire in ice and snow, the demons and monsters will also come out to look for food. You guys must be extra careful. He didn't stay long in Jing Prefecture. His treasure ship rose into the sky and headed to great ruins. The winter in Eternal Peace Empire was outrageously cold, and with the passage of time, it became colder and colder. Soon, numerous icicles hung on the treasure ship, and its speed decreased by a large margin, while the medicinal stone's depletion grew greater and greater. Every few thousand miles, Qin Mu would have to stop the ship and knock off the icicles, only then could the speed of the ship increase once again. Hu Linga stood beside the pill furnace and sent medicinal stones into it from time to time. Qin Mu maintained the direction of the treasure ship, which was flying very low. He turned his vital qi into vermilion bird vital qi to surround his body with blazing fire so as to prevent himself from freezing up. The farther west he went, the more desolate it was. The more desolated it was, the more escapees there were, and the more people were frozen to death on the roads. Furthermore, desolated places had less divine arts practitioners, so there were more places without sun. These places were still covered by a thick dark cloud which made the weather even colder. The power of this snow disaster was much greater than Qin Mu had expected. The number of people dying also surpassed his estimations, and the cold was only becoming stronger. Suddenly, flames burst out from the sky as a huge snake slithered out from the clouds and spewed flames everywhere to force back the cold air. Demonic aura poured out from the huge snake as it slithered out from the clouds. Qin Mu's heart leaped, and he immediately pushed the treasure ship to rise, driving into the clouds. That huge snake looked around with a flirtatious-looking man standing on its head. This man then said in doubt, "I had clearly seen that brat's ship just now, so why has it disappeared?" Sister Chio, release the insects. Countless insects flew out, revealing a woman standing on a cloud of insects. With a stretch of her finger, the insects could be seen flying off in all directions and tunneling into the cloud. Qin Mu's treasure ship shuttled through the cloud when it suddenly came face to face with a golden insect. When that insect saw the ship, it was also shocked and immediately halted. Qin Mu stabbed out with his finger, and his vital qi turned into sword qi and gave off a clink when he stabbed the body of the insect. However, this insect actually didn't die but turned larger instead, becoming almost 3 yards long, squeaking as it pounced at him. Qin Mu's vital qi sunk into Taoqia's sack, and Junior Protector Sword flew out with a whiz, slicing the huge insect into two. At this moment, a chuckle reached him. So the cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult is here. Qin Mu looked towards the source of the voice and saw the clouds behind him turning red. He immediately knew it was bad and shouted out, "Linga, turn up all 3 pill furnaces to the maximum." Boom! Huge flames burst forth and swept through the cloud, striking the bow of the treasure ship. Qin Mu immediately grabbed the helm of the ship so that he wouldn't be thrown off. The treasure ship swayed and almost fell off the sky from this divine art. The bronze beasts below the ship spewed fire at their maximum power, which increased the flying speed by a lot. In a few breaths' time, they flew out of the cloud and broke into fresh air. So cold. Icy wind bombarded Qin Mu in the face, and he shivered from the cold. The vermilion bird vital qi around his body was cooled, and icicles soon covered his face and hands. A huge bang rang out as the treasure ship surpassed the speed of sound. Hu Linga turned off the pill furnaces at the bottom of the ship, and the flames spewing out from the bronze beasts' mouths became shorter. She said, "Young master, we don't have many medicinal stones left." Qin Mu looked back and saw flames pouring out from the clouds. A huge snake flew out, having followed the brilliant gold swarm of insects which were rushing over here. However, their speed was much slower than that of the treasure ship. Even though the treasure ship's speed was slowed, they could still forget about catching up to it. Qin Mu calmed down and used his vital qi to wrap the ship before entering the hold. "How many medicinal stones do we have left?" Hu Linga was still busy pouring the medicinal stones into the pill furnace and could only pout at him. Qin Mu looked over and frowned slightly. He saw that almost all of the baskets were empty, besides 1.5. The medicinal stones used for Eternal Peace Empire's flying ships were all specially prepared and wrapped in craft paper. They just needed to throw in packets after packets in, and they would be able to maintain the flight of the flying ship. They had bought over a dozen baskets of medicinal stones which should have been enough for them to fly to great ruins. However, because they kept stopping on the journey to melt the icicles, Their stock has been depleted. Hu Linger said, "The weather is too cold. If we push the power of the pill furnace to its maximum, I reckon we won't be able to make it to Great Ruins." At this moment, violent tremors came from the treasure ship, and Qin Mu immediately walked out of the hold. Just as he popped his head out, he immediately closed the door of the hold. Clink, clink, clink. A series of concentrated attacks rang out as over a dozen flying swords stabbed into the hold of the ship. Qin Mu pushed open the hold of the ship and saw a sword pellet in the sky whirling about. The deck and hold of the ship were filled with flying swords which were trembling as they tried to pull themselves out to return to the sword pellet. Hack sword form. Qin Mu raised his hand and cut down. Junior Protector sword hacked down, splitting the sword pellet. It exploded, and 100 broken flying swords fell from the sky. "Superb sword," a voice said, and Qin Mu looked towards its source only to see a scholar running towards them through the sky 10,000 feet above them. His speed could make anyone's eyes go wide open. "Heavenly Devil Cult's Cult Master Qin, your identity is revealed and you have a bumpy road ahead of you." That young scholar leaped forward as though he was flying, and divine arts would explode behind him from time to time, pushing his ahead again and again. His voice came over steadily as he smiled. "There are many Dao friends waiting for you in front." Qin Mu's gaze flickered, and he stretched his hand out. Junior Protector sword swept over with a cold light towards the young scholar. This person had loose sleeves which he used to welcome Junior Protector sword. However, when his sleeves got pierced by the sword light, he couldn't help being astonished. He immediately flicked his fingers, and another divine art burst forth from his fingertips, turning into numerous sparrows that carried flames and collided with Junior Protector sword. Qin Mu's sword finger whirled and turned into spiral sword form, shredding all of the sparrows and turning Junior Protector sword bright red from the heat. However, the sword continued to spin and move around that young scholar until he was left bare, with no clothing left. Superb sword skill. The young scholar immediately stopped and distanced himself from the treasure ship. Qin Mu felt that the range in which he could control his vital chi thread had reached its maximum, so he took out the sword sheath and gave it a shake in the wind. The sword sheath turned into a fish dragon, and Junior Protector sword came flying back like a shooting star, getting swallowed by the fish dragon. Amitabha. A name of Buddha came from the sky, and Qin Mu hurriedly raised his head to take a look, coming face to face with the dazzling sunlight. Among the blazing sunlight, he could faintly see a huge Buddha shining with a brilliant golden color. It was descending from the sky straight towards the treasure ship. Qin Mu's vital chi burst forth, and Junior Protector sword flew out once again, transforming into drill sword form to stab at the huge Buddha descending from the sky. Vajra unbeatable. A shout came from midair, and Qin Mu instantly felt the movement of drill sword form becoming incomparably sluggish. Immense pressure came down on him and traveled through his body and onto the treasure ship. The bones in Qin Mu's body creaked from trying to withstand the pressure, and the treasure ship also gave off a creaking sound as well as sank down. This video will end here.